Good evening, everyone. It is now 5:30 p.m. Monday, June 8th, 2020. This meeting of the Paris City Council of the City of Paris is now in order. We will have the invocation. This time will be led by Mayor Pro Tem Ms. Portugal, who will also lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone stand, please.
Let us pray. Lord, bless the leaders of our national, state, and local governments, that we may be a people at peace among ourselves and a blessing to other nations of earth. Grant to all in authority wisdom and grace in the exercise of our duties, foresight to provide for the needs of all people, and courage to fulfill our obligations in our community. You who created us in your own image, grant us grace fearlessly to contend against evil and to make no peace with oppression, and that we may reverently use our freedom. Help us to employ it in the maintenance of justice in our community and among all people, to the glory of your holy name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is item number 4, Citizens Forum. Persons desiring to address the council must limit their presentation to no more than 2 minutes. Unless an item is posted on the agenda, the Texas Open Meetings Act prohibits the council from responding to any comments other than to refer the matter to a future agenda, to an existing policy, or to a staff person with specific factual information. Claims against the city, council members, or employees, as well as individual personal appeals, are not appropriate for Citizens Forum. The Citizens Forum is now open. Anyone wishing to address the council, please step up, give us your name, and you will have 2 minutes. Name and address, too.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Bill Strathern, 4905 Trails End, Paris, Texas, 75462. This is going to be the easiest 1 minute. I'm signing up to ask you to put me on the PEDC, and you'll be getting the paperwork next week. And I just wanted to say that I'll be available at any time for you to call me or visit with me visit with me in case you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to address the council, please step up. Seeing no one, I will now close the Citizens Forum. Consent agenda is next. Are there any items on the consent agenda that anyone wishes to have pulled for additional discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion here.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay. And then there are some people here on item number 19. If the council doesn't mind, I'd like to move this one up next so we can get this done. Yes.
So pursuant to our bylaws on the notification of board members, it has come to my attention that we will need to notify all 5 board members of the EDC in writing minimum 7 days before the vote. And so I'll need to table this item to June 22nd to our next meeting.
Okay. All right. Okay, so first we'll have a motion to move it up for discussion. I'll make a motion, we move it up for discussion. Do I have a second?
I'll second
Okay,
that.
all in favor of moving it up, okay. Okay, now then, it's now the current item, and you want to make a motion to table it, is that correct?
Yes, I was informed by the city attorney that we needed to, in writing, notify all the board members. My first inclination, I was told that we needed to notify the one. They need to be notified in writing. All need to be notified in writing anyway. So we need to push to the June 22nd meeting.
Okay. Ms. Harris, is that correct? You have anything to say on that?
Can you understand me in my mask?
Yes.
There is not a requirement that they be notified in writing, but that is my preference. That is certainly the best practice, is to do that by writing. And the board member, the particular board member needs to be notified, and the board as a whole needs to be notified. And by tabling that for 2 weeks, we can easily get that done.
Okay, have a motion to table.
Hold on, I have a question. Now, Stephanie, you said it's not in the bylaws, that you just recommend it?
The bylaws require that the board of directors and the member who's sought to be removed have to have 7 days' notice. It doesn't mention in writing, but
Oh,
that's the
okay.
best practice.
Well, I mean, I think all of them in this situation been knowing for a while that this was an item, so since they already know, I mean,
Mr. Pilgrim, you just wanted to go ahead and do this tonight if it's not
I
mandatory?
did not
or-
notify all 5 board members, did not know that until later in the day. So, no, to make it go by the bylaws, we have to wait till June, or till our next
I
council.
mean, I've spoke to all 5 and they all know. Everybody know about this, so why prolong it?
And why are we doing this at this council meeting? Because I know for a fact you've been working on this for over 7 days. Why is it just suddenly at this council meeting that we're being told that they need to be notified 7 days in advance? I would have thought that the notification to you would have arrived much sooner.
I was notified for sure on Friday, whenever we talked.
Thursday, I think, is when
Or
we.
Thursday, yeah.
Is when we talked. When I had been.
It was totally a misconception on both ends, and in my opinion, in order to make fair for everybody and all board members, we do it in writing, and we do it next board meeting.
That's certainly the best practice. My reading of the bylaws, because the questions that had been coming to me were about the number of votes required, and so that I didn't get down to the rest of that paragraph talks about the notification. Very well may be that they all know, but apparently there was one that was not specifically notified, one of the board members, and it is just a better procedure and a better practice to put that off.
Okay,
Anyways, I make the move to table the item to the next city council meeting per the bylaws.
okay.
Second.
Got a motion to table and a second to table. All in favor of tabling this item, raise your hand. I guess. All right, I guess we'll table it. Okay. All right. Back to regular agenda item number 11. Discuss and act on a resolution approving the private resale of a tract of tax foreclosed property known as the Westgate Apartments to Rain Financial Services, Inc. in the amount of $75,000 and authorizing the mayor to execute deeds.
And just so y'all can see my face for this, so you know.
Okay.
Mayor, council members, I am your delinquent tax collection lawyer, Tracy Pounders. It is an honor to serve the city of Paris, and it is a pleasure to be here tonight. On this item, it relates to the Westgate Apartments, which is an approximately 8-acre tract bounded by Northwest 7th, Shiloh, Northwest 9th, and West Cherry, roughly on that. It has fallen into disrepair in the past few years, and there was a lot of changing of hands with this property, but the bottom line was a lot of taxes weren't getting paid. And so we filed a suit a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, actually closer, to collect those taxes. And it was a relatively complicated case because we had a lot of key figures that were dead, and we had to figure out a way how to serve them properly, give them notice. And we also had cross claims from a number of lien holders that also had claims. But we were able to finally settle this item and take a judgment in October of last year. And we put this property up for sale on January 7th. The minimum bid of $170,500, there was nobody that wanted to pay that amount. So it was then struck off to the city of Paris. Subsequent to that, and that's where the city of Paris takes ownership of it in trust for itself, Lamar County, Paris Junior College, and Paris ISD. Subsequent to that, Ms. Easton and I, we both attempted to find buyers to come forth. A priority of that is to find somebody that would make a meaningful purchase, that meaning that they would actually come in and help redevelop it so that we can get some housing and get that eyesore into something that is something the community can be proud of. And we finally found someone on May 7th, and they presented this offer, and it's $75,000. The property is appraised at about $486,000, and you may say that's not fair. But if you've ever been to this property, you're going to see it's in horrible shape. Everything that can be stolen out of these buildings has been stolen. The condition, it's going to require an amazing amount of remediation on it to get it to where somebody can get done. We have not received any other offers that came anywhere close to this. I have spoken personally to the people that have made this offer in person. They came to my office, and they have actually placed $15,000 in escrow to show that they are very serious about this. So with the approval of this tonight, we will be able to proceed. We still have to get approval from Lamar County, Paris ISD, and Paris Junior College to sell it at this because it's below that legal minimum of $170,000. But this is the first step to take care of that. And if all the taxing units are in agreement, the mayor will then be able to sign this deed, and hopefully we can get this project up and running and the apartments built and reconditioned so people can move into them. So, and I'm open for any questions.
Yes, sir, I have a question. So they're going to they're going to keep the existing apartments that are there, and they're going to fix them up and make them habitable again? Is that correct?
Yes, that's
What is our
correct.
guarantee that they're going to do that?
I think that's going to be another item we're going to have to work on
I mean,
in
in
terms
other
of
words,
development agreement.
what guarantee do we have that they can't move bulldozers in there, doze the whole thing down, then they got the huge plot of land for like nothing?
We don't have that guarantee at this point.
Okay, I'd like to see that because obviously the land is worth more than they're being offered here. Certainly if it were cleared, it would be worth more, but it's a laudable goal to make some affordable housing there, and the infrastructure partially is there. So I'd like just to make sure that by approving this, that we're making sure that that is in fact what is going to happen with that property.
It is not currently in the offer they have made to guarantee that development. And to be honest, at this point in time, I think it would be very difficult for them to do that because this is just the first step of getting that is actually to get the land. There's a number of things. They're going to have engineers come in and have design teams go into those things. There's a lot of issues. A lot of that is worked out during the process when you're getting the permits to go into the building and such. They are also going to be requesting some incentives from the city that are normally given for projects like this.
And that would have the strings attached to it, certainly.
That is correct. So I don't know that we could do that at
Okay.
this point. I think that comes in the future, very
That's
near
fine.
future, very near future, but not at this point.
All right, any other questions? Open it up.
Well, I had a lot of questions, but if we don't know, so we're going to sell the property and hope that they're going to turn it into what you say they're going to turn it into?
They have said that they're going to make the major investment somewhere between $1.2 and $2 million to get that developed, probably in stages, maybe building by building. There's a number of buildings out there.
So you know who these people are, right?
Yes,
Do
yes.
you think, in your opinion, do you think that it's going to happen? I mean, are they legitimate with their ideas?
I think they, it's hard for me to say that. I really can't guarantee. I don't know them well enough to give a guarantee for them. They are certainly earnest
Okay.
in their desire. Now, it's always, the proof is in later on when can they get financing? Can they get title insurance, which is kind of an issue with tax properties and such. There's a number of issues that are between here and somebody coming and renting an apartment and moving in. And this one's just the first step. Pardon me.
How long has this?
That's not mine.
I'm sorry. How long has this property been in our stable, I guess?
Since January 7th.
Okay.
And we've had, Carla might correct me on this, but we've had 4 or 5 people that came up that wanted to buy it for $0. They would take it for $0. We had a number of people that said, we want to buy it for the $170,000, But once they got out to the property, they just shook their heads and said, no, we're backing off. This is the best offer we've been able to get in terms
Now,
of that.
I know that that property has been vacant and in a state of tremendous disrepair
Yes,
for several years.
yes.
And that's because it's been owned by people that have died? I mean, it's been tied up in their estate? Why did it take so long for the city of Paris to get possession of this area?
Well, one of the reasons why there was a little bit of a delay was questions of liability of taking over the property. But it was about a little less than 2 years ago, talking with Mr. Godwin about it. I told him I didn't think that that was a real concern. I think we've got a lot of immunities, as a city, and he gave me the green light to go ahead and file that suit. The reason I mentioned, the dead people and the other claims is just, why did it take a year and a half to get to a judgment? And that's why. It's not impossible to get judgments against dead people. I'm sorry to say it that way, but it just takes, there are additional steps that have to be taken to make sure that you get it done legally, so.
We just have a lot of property that's abandoned and in such horrible disrepair. And I think the council is united in trying to get rid of, try to get it turned around, maybe try to save property before it has to be torn down or sold for way under value. And I'm just trying to kind of maybe work my way through the process too, that may or may not be working for some things.
Carla, can they repair this property? You're an engineer. I mean, you know enough to look.
There's a lot of work to be done. I'm not saying that they can't.
I know it's in really
I think
bad shape. I've never
it
been
may
in
be
it,
more
though.
expensive to do so once they really get into the weeds, but it can be done.
What's the zoning for that property?
Oh, it's residential. I'm sorry, I should know that, and I did not prepare for that question. But we've met with several groups of investors over the last year. I mean,
Worst case scenario, if they go in there and they did demo the property and then did residential or something, or could the land use, I guess the land use plan goes for residential where that is, or is there another use?
yes, sir. That area is residential use. It's
Okay.
existing residential, and that
No
would not
multifamily
change.
or nothing?
If they wanted to do something, it would certainly have to go through the typical zoning
P&Z.
process. And so it would be a zoning case for y'all to consider and vote on.
Well, I went toured the property myself because I had a couple of people out of town that wanted to look at the property. If y'all done found one person that even want to entertain the possibility of this property, I toured it myself. That's a big step.
Yeah.
If somebody even want to think about getting this property, because they're going to have to invest a lot of money, so.
That's correct. That we've met with at least, I'd say, 5 different groups, and ultimately, one or two were willing to take it on for low cost, no cost. We've only received this one offer, for a cash purchase of the property. So we feel like it covers some of the expenses that have, at least in the delinquent taxes, as well as the liens that have been placed on the property for abatements over the years. So the goal is to get it out of our trustee status and into someone's hands that can do something with it. And to your original question, a couple of years ago, that's when we reached out to Mr. Pounders to start this process, because nothing was being done. It was a code case, a recurring issue, but until you have an investor that's taking interest, you're sort of at risk in initiating that process on properties that you don't have anyone interested in, because then the city just takes on that trustee status for more properties to own and maintain. In this instance, someone had reached out to us with a potential interest. Now that deal fell through. They wanted it for no cost. We feel like we had an obligation to try to at least sell the property and recuperate some of the back taxes. So that's how we got here, is we initiated that a couple of years ago, and then it's kind of led to where we are today.
Thank you.
Can you not sell it with a contingency that within a certain amount of time, they will begin renovations, that you'll see progress?
I don't know, Tracy, is that something that we could write
It is something, it is not within the offer that they presented to us. a commitment to do something for a certain amount of time. If that is the desire of the council, I can return back to them and say we want, we need to have some kind of, I guess, are you asking if they don't do something within a certain amount of time, it reverts back to us, a reverter?
A contingency? I don't know.
Okay.
I think what she's trying to
You're the
say
expert.
is we've had some historical buildings be purchased from individuals and the city, or attempted to be purchased, and then they take the tax credits available for that building. Say if there is I don't know if there is, and it may be in an opportunity zone, or there's some way, some loopholes that some of these organizations or individuals buy these properties, and then they use those tax credits in Austin, or they use them in Longview, or they use them in other cities, and they have to leave this historical building, and I do that in quotes, or this opportunity zone, low-income housing, whatever they make it up to be, and then we end up with a dilapidated building. They end up using the tax credits down there. It's a huge benefit to them. They use them through these tax credit banks. I'm not sure if this property could be used for that, but that's the only thing and I think that's kind of where she's going with, if they bought it, we don't want them to just purchase it and then sit on it. We want them to purchase it and either knock the building down and do something else, clean it up, get it operational. That's kind of, I think, that's my idea.
Yes,
Sorry, Mayor
and
Pro Tem.
the first person who was interested in it had contacted me, and I got with John, but the engineers and the people, I mean, he wanted to redo it all in stages. That was his plan. That's why he said at no cost. But because everybody he brought in to look at it was like, hey, demolish it, because it's just gonna cost too much to redo.
And it could anyway.
Yeah, and then he was determined not to do that because he wanted to restore them, and he was like, I can do it in stages than that. But as long as it's something that either they do it or demolish it, if it's demolished, it still looks better than what it does now.
Yeah.
Because it's a safety hazard right now because it's all open, anybody can walk in them. I mean, the good thing about it is the roofs are good because the guy who had purchased it had redone the roofs on them. So the roofs are good. And then, he had redone the copper, he had restored a lot of them, but like you say, everything was stolen out of it. Doors, windows, everything. So that's why it's back in a terrible shape it is now. So, if we can just, like I say, something, demolish it or either go ahead and start his plan, then, I would feel good about that.
Worst case scenario, we don't let him purchase it, and we'll have this conversation next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
We're gonna be talking about this next year and the next year, so, we need to be willing to work with someone who's willing to take on this big responsibility.
Yeah, I brought this up to begin with, but after listening to the discussion, doesn't sound like this is an issue with tax credits or anything. Looks like this is a very viable person that would like to do what we would like to see done, have it restored with affordable housing, but at a minimum is willing to invest this amount of money into it. It's not a lot of money, but it's enough money that you got to be serious to want to put this down.
A meaningful amount.
So I'm comfortable with this personally. So
And I don't want to scare him off. It's the best offer we've got, but I sure don't want to see another First National Bank building
yeah. Or Belford.
or the Belford.
All right, well, I'm comfortable with this. Any other discussion on this? I'll make a motion that we approve the private resale of this tract of property in the amount of $75,000 as we discussed.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, all unanimous? Thank you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Item number 12, receive an update on the status of the 2017 street bond projects, status of prioritized roads under the bond, general road maintenance, and discuss and act on any adjustments to prioritized road list. Ms. Easton.
Thank you, Mayor. The 2017 Street Bond Program, as you know, is a voter-authorized bond sale of $9.5 million to be spent on street improvements across town. I'm sorry. Thank you.
All right.
The program included a list of 25 priority streets that was developed by staff and approved by council. With the first 14 projects able to be funded with the 9.5 million. To date, we've completed 9 projects for approximately $7.8 million. And those streets include Church Street, 7th Northwest and 7th Southwest, East Cherry, East 3rd, South Collegiate, 33rd Southeast, Graham, and 17th Southeast. There are a few projects on the list that were originally planned for a mill and overlay, but staff is proposing a few changes to those in order to maximize the amount of improvements we can afford with the $9.5 million. The first of those is 25th Southeast. It was originally planned for a full depth reconstruction with significant drainage improvements. There's a large culvert near Lamar with an open channel that's parallel to the street. A lot of that was planned to be enclosed, but whenever we took that to bid, it came out well over budget, and so we've done some value engineering to get some drainage improvements near Clark Lane, and then we plan to do a mill and overlay for the remainder of that, which will be a nice clean ride surface and still provide a street improvement while saving significant amount of money on some of the drainage. And the next modification that we're proposing is to First Street and Kaufman Streets in the downtown area. First Street was identified in the comprehensive plan update as well as the tool design group to receive some significant changes by way of making it a pedestrian street between Lamar and Clarksville with outdoor vendors and decorative lighting and some pedestrian type improvements that further the downtown environment. And because our street bond program would just be a mill and overlay with some sidewalk replacements, we feel that a portion of that might be wasted. It would be good to apply for a CDBG grant or some other funding source that could further the concepts that were approved with our downtown plan and not use the street bond funds for all of that. So we're proposing that we leave $100,000 in the First Street bucket, if you will, to use as seed money for a grant application under the CDBG Main Street program, which has recently been increased from the typical amount, and they've added our the ability to apply for infrastructure, not just sidewalks anymore. So that's an expanding program, and we see some opportunity to get more money from the state for that type of project. And then lastly, Clement Road has a 24-inch water main that, as you may recall, has had a couple of breaks in the last 2 or 3 years. When that thing breaks, it breaks big. It makes a really big mess, and it's a really big street patch that has to go in. Because that project would be $400,000 to do an asphalt mill and overlay, and we are still at risk of a future main break, we're recommending that we scale that project down to a base level up and a chip seal operation, which can be done in-house by the street department. And that would save a significant amount of money on the asphalt work and allow us to apply that money to another project, at least until such time that we can either replace or do an upgrade to that water main and not be at risk for that level of break. So with those changes, that gets us to project number 15 on our list, which is Fitzhugh. And I'd be happy to take your feedback on any of that. But before I do, I guess I'll mention our maintenance operations as well. There was a question of how we approach our street maintenance program. The street department in Public Works is responsible for maintaining streets. They don't have a laydown machine. They can't do full width and full length hot mix asphalt, but they do chip seal operations. That basically is an oil treatment with a rock layer that seals off water from infiltrating into the street cracks, and it prolongs the life of the street for 3 to 5 years tops, typically. But they ride all the streets in Paris at least 2 times a year and try to find areas where they can group together 3 to 6 streets in a certain neighborhood or a certain area that they can apply a chip seal treatment and kind of achieve an overall improvement in the area. And they're able to do that with their operating budget of $600,000. And he typically finds, like I said, 3 to 6 streets in each quadrant of the city. And then, of course, as requests or complaints, he approaches those kind of on an as-needed basis or as direction is given. There's a list provided in your packet. That's the current list for this year on what the street department has prioritized for chip and seal. As far as patchwork, if there's a utility cut or a bad patch of street and it's a little linear, not full width, but say 100 feet or less, they can do a hot mix patch with their small equipment, but they can't do full width. And so if we have a project where they need to do hot mix asphalt for a full block curb to curb, that's not typically something that our street department does in-house. We have to contract that out. We just don't have the capacity to do that with our equipment and our crews. They use hot mix for some of the smaller repairs, and then for for pothole repairs, they use a cold mix, and the reason for that is because they have to put it in the back of the trucks and drive around town and fix these kind of as they see them or as they know of them. And if you get hot mix asphalt, it will harden up in the back of the truck, and they can't apply it. So you have to use a cold mix. It doesn't compact as well, and it doesn't last as long. But for maintenance operations, that's the available material for the application that they have. So with that kind of addresses our 2017 street bond program, as well as how we handle roadway maintenance. So I'd be happy to entertain any comments or questions on our approach for the street bond. Get any direction?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, when you propose a mill and overlay instead of what you were going to do, how long does it take before you revisit that street again for the, I guess, the other treatment that you had to?
The other treatment, say as Church Street? Is that what-
No, not, I know
the
that's a
chip
big.
seal.
I know that's a big deal, but you know, I noticed the one, on 24th Street, the 24th, number 8, 24th Street, Clarksville to Lamar. You know, that's a real heavy used street. People use that as a cut through. And, I just kind of wonder about going to, a mill and overlay. How long would it take? This is a temporary thing until I guess you can revisit it for a better repair or something?
The
I mean,
overlay is exactly
how does that
what we
work?
did on the rest of these streets. So East Cherry, 7th, 3rd, that's what we did on those streets as well. That's a mill and overlay. You basically mill off 2 inches of asphalt, and then you place back 2 inches of hot mix asphalt.
Oh, okay.
And so it's consistent with the other street improvements. The only projects that we actually did full depth is Church Street and 17th Southeast. 24th Street was also going to be like 17th Southeast, which is a complete rebuild. It takes about a year. It's a big project, but it was a very, very expensive project, and we think we can see we can get a good quality job by resurfacing like all the other mill and overlay projects and some localized drainage improvements near the Clark Lane intersection, and be good. We'll still have a quality product. It won't last 30 years,
It seems
but it'll
like it's really
be.
just kind of whooped out on the south side or the west side of the road there, kind of across from the high school. And some of those little localized areas is kind of what you're talking about?
Say that again? I'm sorry, I missed the first part of what you said.
You're talking from Clarksville to Lamar or Clarksville to the Loop?
No, I'm talking Lamar to Clarksville.
Lamar to Clarksville?
Yeah, the in-town
Okay.
area with the dips.
Yeah.
We had originally proposed to take out some of those dips, and in order to do that, you have to do a complete rebuild because you're changing the road profile. You're putting pipes in the ground. It's a big project, but it's a very expensive one. And you may recall the open channel up near Lamar. There's some apartments kind of offset from the road. We were going to enclose all out of that so that could have a typical driveway, but it's very, very expensive, and it would blow the rest of our budget. So.
Okay, now Fitzhugh, what's your plans for Fitzhugh? Because that's one of our busiest streets. That's our most, pretty much the way to get to the hospital, elementary school.
Yes, sir.
And all of that. So what's our plans for Fitzhugh?
It would be the same as what we've seen on 7th and 3rd and South Collegiate. It's a 2-inch mill and overlay, and it would be from Pine Bluff to Hickory, which is just about
Yes.
where the concrete starts.
Yes.
And then there's a small area along Hickory that's about a half a block that needs some repairs as well, and we've noted those. There would also be some sidewalk area. Whenever we touch a street, for ADA reasons, we're supposed to bring it into compliance, and so there may be some sidewalk and ADA ramps at the side streets that will have to be done with that project.
And right there at that, I know speaking with the Streets Department Director, that just a block from there on Martin Luther King and Fitzhugh, that's a real bad area that they consistently have to put that cold mix on, and it's just not working.
Okay, I can speak with Rufus about trying to get that on his list of chip seal if that's appropriate, or maybe with the mill and inlay, a future mill and inlay project.
Thank you.
Ms. Easton, which of these are the city doing in-house? Which of these projects? Could you enumerate those? Or any of them specific that the city's doing all of it, or tell me about that?
None of the projects on the 2017 street bond list, is this the list you're talking about?
Yeah.
We're not doing any of the construction in-house.
Okay.
All of these projects have been bid out. Several of them were designed in-house in the engineering department. We put together the bid specs, but they've all been contracted out with third-party contractors.
Okay. When the city does a project, you know, I may be getting off topic here, but I was appalled by what was going on Sherman Street, and in fact, made an emergency call to the city manager. If this isn't appropriate for this meeting, we can discuss it at the next meeting. But I was wondering if the city has any safety protocols that are mandatory to make sure we don't leave gaping holes in a road that's a hazard to humans and cars and people on bicycles where there's no streetlights. I want to know how come there were no barriers in front of that obvious safety hazard.
I've addressed that matter with the staff. I've talked to all the superintendents personally about this matter, and I've sent them out a memo laying out my expectations for barricades and street closures and so forth, and they've complied with that since then. So I've explained to them that going forward on projects like this, we'll have full across from curb to curb barricades, and those will move as the project moves. And it was just an oversight on my part.
Wasn't
And
your
it's,
part. No, sir, you weren't even here.
They're my staff.
This had been happening apparently for 2 months before you got here.
Perhaps,
And
yeah.
I was not aware of it until it was brought to my attention, and I just, it was appalling to me, okay? I can't even imagine that such an enormous safety hazard was left for 2 months. I'm guessing that's how long it's been sitting there with no barriers in front of it at all. I just want to make sure that we never do that as a city again.
Yes, sir, understood. We are required to follow OSHA regulations and to
Well, that could not possibly have been in
Understood.
compliance with OSHA.
Right.
It couldn't have been in compliance, it wasn't compliance with a kid on a bicycle or a person driving through town. There wasn't even a light on it. There wasn't even a piece of tape in front of it. You could drive your car into this ditch, not a ditch, you would disappear into this. It was 15 feet deep. Multiple cars would drive into it. So I appreciate Mr. Path taking care of this on an emergency basis, but I just want to see to it moving forward that we never have a situation like this again.
Certainly, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on Martin Luther King coming off 20th, the work that they just finished, are they coming back? Because it's some bad spots. I hit one.
Oh, dear.
I
So
hit one,
my
too.
car is very low, and it's some dangerous spots that we're gonna be getting some bills from some citizens pretty soon complaining, because it's a couple of holes, if they hit them, they're gonna tear up something on their car,
Oh, dear. Okay,
especially
well,
a low car.
My little car, I hit this hump, and I had to really gun it to get over it. I mean, it was.
It's
it was
bad
the
right now.
Equivalent of a speed bump.
Which spot is this? I'm sorry, I missed the MLK and what, I'm sorry?
20th Northeast.
20th Northeast? Okay, I'll talk to Rufus about that.
that is actually part of our utility work that's going on. They've replaced the sewer, but the road work is not complete. I know last week they were trying to do some level up because the trenches had settled. It was very wet when they had some of those open. So they're fighting with the material that was put back. They're going to have to re-excavate some of that and compact it back in order for us to be able to repair the street. So it is something that we're watching, but I'll certainly point out the bumps that you've mentioned today and make sure that they take care of those and maintain them until we can get the asphalt repaired.
Could you also quickly address out on the loop at Collegiate, the work that's going on there? It seems like last year that was torn up and they laid pipe, and those businesses, it's hard to get in and out. What's going on that it's
So-
happening again?
So last year, they left a 400-foot gap. They started at one end and came this direction, and they started at the crossing because the boring contractor was here. And then there was a 400-foot gap that was not replaced last year. This was it was the crew that does their large diameter sewer work left town, and they are back to complete it. So it's not rework, it's just finishing out a project that they started last year. The driveways that are impacted now were not impacted previously. It's still a nuisance during the work, and we're trying as best we can to get them to finish that up quickly. But this is the same project. They're just filling in the part that was not built when they were here last year.
Thank you.
Downtown looks really good.
Thank you. We've got striping coming next week.
Yes.
We have been working with TxDOT on a few
I've almost
things.
had a couple wrecks.
I'm
I
sorry.
think
but
I
hopefully
got,
there was
I
everyone
was,
going slow
I got
enough.
on the council, and that was one of the first big items that cranked up, and man, I'm happy to see that. It's looking really good. I know we still got a lot to do down there, but it's really coming together down there.
One question about downtowns, now that the parallel parking is done on one side, but the diagonal parking is only done on the other, it kind of narrows the road to the point where people don't know if it's one lane or two lane, and I almost got sideswiped as a result of that. When's the time frame on when the diagonal will be taken out, and then the street, I guess, will get a little wider when that happens?
Well, our plan for that right now was to keep the diagonal, the head-in parking on the outside. And we're considering that phase 2, and we can come back and widen sidewalks on the outside of the plaza. You know, we haven't put the stripes down yet, so I guess we have an opportunity if the council desires for us to stripe that parallel. It's something
I
to
don't,
entertain.
it's confusing right now, and
That sidewalk's gonna widen, so that I think the curb that comes out and rounds out is the actual width, and then the only thing that's gonna change is that is gonna move out probably with another 3 feet, and then you're gonna parallel park right there instead of
Right.
diagonal,
But
is the
that's
way I
not
understood
planned
it.
with, the way it will be striped right now is with 2 lanes in each direction. We're not losing any lanes. You still have two through lanes that cross over the plaza. But the inside, the new work is gonna be parallel parking, and then with head-in remaining on the outside. And
I
that's
think it's
because
dangerous.
it's just a timing thing. We haven't expanded the sidewalks on the outside, and TxDOT didn't make us do it with this
if it
work.
really is two lane, maybe we need to put even at a minimum those little sticky things, I don't know what you call them, rather than totally striping it, but.
Just something temporary?
It's a little dangerous down there because people don't know, it looks like it's one lane, and you have 2 lanes going to almost 1 lane, and like I say, I almost had a wreck there myself. But I'll leave it to your discretion, but it would seem to me it would be reasonable to make it obvious where the lanes are downtown.
Yes, sir.
So that people can know to drive in them.
What's the timeline on going back to 2 lane, or going back to,
Two-way or having
two-way?
it striped for
Yeah,
2 lanes?
what's that timeline? I know we've moved one street over.
So we started the study. That's going to take a submittal and approval through TxDOT. So we started the study. We were in the middle of the utility work downtown, and they basically rejected the traffic counts because they said, when you've got streets closed, you can't, that's not a legal count. You have to wait till the streets are back opened up. And so now we're coming, they did a lot of the prep work. They came back and took the traffic counts. The engineer is finishing up that study now, and we should be ready to submit to TxDOT very soon. That's a lengthy process. It goes to Austin. I don't
It's 12
anticipate-
months or something, I
Oh, yes,
remember, or
it's-
something like that,
We
yeah.
probably, from the time we submit, we'll be talking about it for a year or more.
Okay.
So it's not something that happens quickly, but it is something that we're working on, and given the timing of the utilities and everything else that's been going on, it's just been a little bit delayed on our submittal, but we are still working on that and plan to have a submittal hopefully this summer to TxDOT.
So phase 2 would be the other sidewalk. We said we were gonna have enough money to do the plaza portion first, and then once we thought we had some more money to finish it, I think it was a little more money to move those other sidewalks and readjust everything.
That's correct. At that
Okay.
point, we'd come back and have to convert the head-in parking to parallel parking on the outside of the plaza,
Yeah.
and then expand those sidewalks. But the footprint is set. You can kind of visualize that. It's 2 lanes in, 2 lanes through. And the idea is we've got 12-foot lanes. There's actually 24 feet between those bump outs, so there's plenty of room to get through. But the idea is it slows cars down when they are pulling through, and it's safer for pedestrians. And I think we're achieving that.
When will it be two-way? That's not in the immediate future, is it? Okay.
No, sir, not until I get feedback from TxDOT.
The northwest corner, that's probably the most dangerous because it S-curves a little bit, and people in this lane going straight, and then this lane want to go straight. They run into each other not knowing it's supposed to. So can we put something there just to help guide that?
Absolutely. We call them puppy tracks. That's kind of not the technical term. But it's a dotted stripe that guides cars through an intersection. You see them at a lot of intersections. So we're going to have puppy tracks in both directions on each corner of the plaza. And then we're also going to have them on Lamar at Second, where there's a shift there as well that's a bit confusing. And then we're going to come back and restripe an area on Bonham where the lane lines don't line up there at 4th Street, I believe it is. So they're going to come back and patch over like 2 of the white lines and transition that better. So we've learned some things, and we're going to have some better transitions. And again, they're going to be here next Monday. And so we've essentially got 1 week of as it is, or I can certainly try to see if we can get some
But
temporary.
that area is bad. I mean, you can, if you don't, I mean, I'm from Paris, so I know it goes like that, but if you don't, I mean, you're gonna keep straight and this car is allowed to keep straight,
Yeah.
then you have a chance for an accident.
Yes, sir.
So you're needing from us tonight an approval of the changes you've made in this, a verbal approval. Are we in agreement on the changes that Ms. Easton has made or suggested?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need a motion on this, or just I think it's a consensus on the council, yes. So continue, we agree.
Not actually.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is item number 13, discuss and act on a resolution authorizing the signing of the terms and conditions, certificates, and other necessary documents to pursue the coronavirus relief fund created by the CARES Act. Mr. Path.
Greetings, City Council. My first time in front of you in person, so and, glad to be here and to be with you today. So, not my first item. I did have an item on a prior agenda, but this is my first one in front of you here. We were made aware by actually the Texas Municipal League working with the cities with the help of of Mayor Clifford. We sent a letter off to the governor requesting some funding through the CARES Act. The CARES Act was originally dedicated towards states and then cities of 500,000 plus. But obviously, we have needs as well, and we have expenses through our EMS, police, Parks Department cleaning. We have a lot of COVID-19 expenditures, and so the governor did set aside about $1.85 billion to go towards cities of smaller than 500,000. They went ahead and gave us a $55 per capita amount. So we have an allotment of a little shy of 1.4 million, $1,393,150. Now, obviously, that's not ours to be given. For sure, we have to have the expenditures to support that, but that's our allocation if we can get that much, if we have that much expenditure. So. Now, obviously, if we're going to use federal funds, we have to go by their rules, federal guidelines, and terms and conditions for those pieces. A lot of reporting, a lot of counting that goes with that. We'll be seeking a third-party administrator to help us administer those things because it can be quite involved and quite a process to maintain that. But if we sign this, if we approve this tonight, we'll be giving 20% up front, about $278,000 to go towards expenditures we've already had so far. Now, these expenditures, they're things that they cannot be part of your normal process. Like our EMS, when going to a call, that's our normal process. We'll be reimbursed for that. But the expenditure for cleaning our equipment after, like we have a process, we fumigate through our transfer station and we maintain equipment that way. That is COVID. We've had some overtime, FFCLA, I think, of time as well. So there's a lot of pieces that we'll get reimbursed for. So. But with this, we just need your approval tonight. There's a resolution involved here to get this funding here. Let's see here. Anything else I need to cover? The timeline for this is anything from March 1st, 2020 to December 30th, 2020. So this is retroactive. So basically back to when COVID-19 started to really hit us on a budget. Then we have 90 days after December 30th to get our final invoices, our final reimbursement request in. So we have some time with that. And but that is the current timeline they have given us for that. So. Otherwise, I'd be requesting that you would authorize a resolution and we would sign it and get the process started. Then I'll be procuring for a third-party administrator to help us administer and manage the program correctly, which is also part of the funding as well. They allocate up to 5% of funding to go towards third-party administrators, so it wouldn't be our expense. So, any questions you have for this? Or
I'm curious about what are our COVID-19 expenditures so far, approximately?
I don't have those. We don't know the numbers just yet. I've asked all the staff to start tallying all their amounts so far. Now, thankfully, a lot of our staff, they were thinking ahead of time.
Right.
Now, prior to this, there was nothing known coming to us to help us, and a lot of the funding that the federal and even state were putting out there, it was for small business, homeowners, which is good. They need that obviously, but nothing was talked about for local governments. And so, until we received this letter, we had no idea we were going to get any money. So, but thankfully, through the police, EMS, fire, parks, they were starting to kind of keep track of their time and everything. Now, with that said, you can keep track of things, but until you get the rules, you don't know what's eligible. And so like we found out, EMS, just because we go to a COVID-19 call, doesn't mean we will be reimbursed all of our expenditures just because that's our normal duty to go to a call. COVID, stroke, whatever it is, it's a call. And but the time spent afterwards, cleaning, the PPE, that kind of stuff, that would be covered. So I don't have a good number for you right now, but as we get into the reporting process, we will have numbers because we have to report those.
Okay.
It's a very sizable amount, but I couldn't even guess at it right now.
And are there any antibody testing still going on, or did we use them all? Or?
No, we still have some. We did, I should probably refer to the mayor here, but we did some testing. We still have quite a few left, but.
Yeah, and we'll probably do that again when the pandemic has reaching, hopefully, its end, and
Right.
people want to know. I think that's really the more appropriate time to do it. We did as many, the people that wanted to be done, there hasn't been a demand for additional, but this should cover that. We might be able
It's-
to offer that for free moving forward, if we can get reimbursed for that testing.
It's my understanding that that should be covered as an eligible expense. Now, obviously, that's where getting a administrator to help us walk through those fine details, but it's my belief that we can get reimbursed for the expense in those COVID-19 antibody tests.
Well, I've heard a lot of talk about the antibody testing, and everybody has complimented the way it was handled, the way you could register, the way, they were greeted, the whole entire process
Yeah.
was done extremely well.
I'd like to personally thank
Oh,
Chief
yes.
Tuttle and Russell Thrasher and the various people that put not only that together, they put together, I mean, we had kind of a dry run when we were trying out the antibody test, but they used the same methods that the procedures and policies they had set up when we did our emergency testing that we had to do over the nursing homes. And I mean, it was done very professionally. So I really want to commend them, and Mr. Thrasher set up the online reservation, and it was, I understand it went without a hitch. So I'd
Yeah.
like to publicly thank all of them, and Chief Tuttle too, who took a very active role in all this. So.
Yeah, I too am very proud of the work they did. I turned it right over to them, and they took it from there and got it done. So a lot of good staff working under the city. So.
I noticed that counties and school districts are eligible. Do
Yes.
they do their own application?
They have their own allocated funding. So the city, Reno, county, we are all allocated a $55 per capita amount. And so now we do have the option, again, they did a pretty good job of being broad here to where if the county or Reno or someone else in our area has the ability to go in together, we had the ability to kind of pool our funds. I'm not sure if that's going to really be some necessary requirement, because these are reimbursement expenditures for things that we have spent money on for, like cleaning supplies, PPE, overtime we've done. But if something were to come up that we can put our heads together on, that we might be able to tap their funds, our funds, and do something like that. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Yeah, some of the other things that would be covered on this, when the cleaning after the antibody testing, I mean, the fire truck has to come in and do that, and that would be COVID-19 related. So there's quite a variety of things that could be used, that we could use this funding for.
Yeah.
But this could not be used for loss of income due to economic depression or anything like that, obviously, correct?
No,
Yeah.
correct. That's my understanding, yeah.
And who would be managing the disbursements of different things that this would cover?
Well, again, these are reimbursements for expenditures that we're having on the job, and so anytime the EMS goes out for a call, that's our normal duty, but then we track the expenditures, and then we report that through our administrator to do that. So like the park department, they've been cleaning the playground equipment with the chemicals. That's reported back to us, to the administrator, and so it's nothing additional what we'd be doing. It's just more of what has our response been thus far, and what going forward, things that we can get reimbursed on expenditures because of COVID. And so now, again, there could be some things in here that we might be able to do new in addition, but until I get administrator, they're all kind of unknowns at this point to know what's allowed. Because when you have federal funding, you don't want to get too far outside the line, or else they'll pull it all back. And you don't want to pull it all back. And so,
All right, and you're needing a motion from us, right? on
yeah, to approve the
this?
resolution.
I make a motion, we act on the resolution authorizing the signing of the terms and conditions and other necessary documents to pursue the CRF CARES Act.
A second.
All in favor? And it's unanimous. Thank you, Ms. Path. I think you're up next. Also discuss, number 14, discuss and act on the procurement process for the Love Civic Center Restoration Project. If you'll go over this with us, sir.
Yeah, this was actually one of my very first things that walked in my door when I got here. And I gave you kind of a little brief rundown in my notes here about some of the history here, so I won't bore your time with that, about the occupation tax, what the chamber approached the WRA architect to do an assessment, and the city ultimately approved a 1.5 bond to go towards portions of the assessment. Obviously, the assessment was $3 million worth of expense. That's a big hotel occupation tax to try to raise. So the city, working with the chamber, did a 2% increase, which gave you 1.5 capacity. So we have the money already. And so the work started a year or so ago. Chamber approached a local entity to start doing some of the work. They used some of the state bidding to get like an audio visual system updated, some sidewalk repairs, those kind of things. But when I arrived, I was approached by the chamber and said, we kind of need to take a step back and re-examine going forward, because there's still almost $1.3 million left to be spent. And so there was some miscommunication about how procurement works, about how to properly prioritize things. Nothing that I see was done wrong. It's just they just needed some guidance, because they don't live this world like we do. And so they approached the city and myself, and we took a good step back. We looked at the remaining items on the assessment from the original 2017 assessment, and we realized that some of these things, if we're going to do them, we need them designed right. And it's not something that we can do in-house, like HVAC. I have a lot of experience with HVAC, and you don't just throw it together. And so you have to have it properly designed, or else it may fall apart. And so working with the chamber, Paul Allen, some of the board members, Carla, myself, our recommendation now is to procure an architect to guide us through the process. It'd be a two-step process, because again, we have $1.3 million worth of revenue. We have over 2 million plus of items to be done. So what is the biggest need here? And so we kind of need some guidance to know which is the bigger priority with our input. I know some of the chamber, they do want some aesthetic type things. If we're going to spend $1.5 million, there are some things they want to kind of do that would help kind of make the place look a little nicer. And but at the same time, as I explained to them, you can't ignore the behind the wall stuff too. And so if you have an HVAC that goes out, then it doesn't matter if you have a nice pretty bathroom, your HVAC's out. And so those are all things we would need to work through. But us as staff, myself especially, we're not qualified to know how to design some of those things or what is truly the priority. So the two-step process, again, would be to find an architect or at least some kind of like firm that can kind of guide us through prioritizing the remaining items, then looking at the remaining amount of funding we have. And then from there, once we kind of develop our priority list, negotiating a second phase of the contract to design those portions. Because again, at this point, we don't know what that final second phase looks like until we prioritize working with them. So they would help us walk through that. So this is a process I did back in Nebraska City for a program that it was bigger than what we could grasp our heads around until we brought someone in to kind of help us focus in, and then we were able to negotiate a actual design package and a bid process and have them oversee the work for us. So that's our process right now. So I wanted to, given there's a lot of money here, I wanted to bring it to your attention. That's what I plan to do, unless you tell me to do something differently. This is by request of the chamber. Now, they are the manager of the Love Civic Center, but obviously it's our building. And so it's a good opportunity for us to work together hand in hand to figure out how to do this right. And so I will be involved, Carl will be involved, Paul Allen will be involved, and we will work together to work those steps there. So any questions or concerns or better ideas?
I am so impressed with the request for qualifications. Ever since I've been on the council, I have asked, do we require, for instance, a recommendation from some city that they've done business with in the past? Mm-hmm. I was always told yes, but I never saw anything like the detail that you have here. It's excellent.
Well, thank you. I was able to cheat some, and I mean, the nice thing about working for cities is there's thousands of examples of other cities out there. So I approached another community bigger than us who actually has a procurement division, and blessed to have that. So they were able to give me some documents, and then from my prior experience, I was able to kind of produce this version here. And now it's getting into Texas, whole new procurement rules. It's totally new to me from what Nebraska was like. So under professional services, you don't bid it out. That's actually a requirement. State law says thou shalt not bid based off price. It's off of qualifications. And so now, with that, as I'm learning recently, if you have an active firm you're working with, you can go with them. Or if you have no firm, then you procure it through this RFQ process to help you find someone who knows how to do this. And so. But that's what we put together here.
Excellent, thank you.
Comments? I'm real pleased with this, and I think it'll be certain that the money's spent appropriately and expeditiously on the things that are needed the most. That big thing we got from the study that had all of this stuff, it was overwhelming knowing what was needed and what was pie in the sky. So I appreciate you doing this. I'm fully in favor of this.
This will take some time. Obviously, when you get an architect, you add some more time, but at the same time, we got 1.3 million on the table. You want to make sure you do it right. So
I think Mr. Allen also wrote us a letter that he was in support of this. He couldn't make it tonight for, he had a little family emergency or something, but I'm in support as well.
Now, once the study is done, will it come back before the council, or?
yeah, we'll do that. So what I envisioned is we'll procure for the architect. I will bring that contract, which I got a draft version here in front of you. We'll bring that back for your approval. That is for phase one. So then we will do the study. I see it kind of chamber staff, board of directors working on that, and we'll prioritize. Then we'll bring those recommendations back to the council, and I'll probably run through the chamber as well if they're interested, because we are in a partnership together with each other. It's the city's money, but they manage it for us, and so it's a good partnership there. But so we would then bring that back for a phase two amendment to the contract, which you would then approve at that point.
Okay.
And so.
Thank you.
More questions or discussion? All right, we need a motion on this.
Make a motion to approve as written.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Path. Item number 15, receive and discuss the 2020 water and wastewater cost of service study. You can come give us the bad news, sir.
You'll forgive me, I'm going to have to take my mask off to present to you tonight. Again, Chris Eckert with NewGen Strategies and Solutions. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. I'm glad that we're able to be in person. I know this was originally planned to be virtual, but it really is nice to be here with you this evening. While the mayor has mentioned bad news, hopefully we can put a bit of a silver lining on that cloud as we move forward. So again, as we move into slide 2 of the presentation tonight, the study we do every year is required under the city's contracts that you have with your wholesale customers. You have some industrial customers, their rates are set by contract, and that is set via the process that we go through in this study. As we go through the study, we also look at the city's retail rates. And so what I'm here tonight to present to you is the retail rate recommendation coming from that study. As you see on slide 3 again, and we've talked about this before, when we set rates for your contract customers, that's a historical process. We look back. We look back at actual expenditures, in this case for fiscal year 19. That's set by contract. That is a very typical process when you have wholesale customers. Your retail customer rates are set looking forward at what your current budget is. So for your retail rates, we look at 2019-2020, so fiscal year 2020. You did have a rate increase that you undertook last year. It tended to vary. It was more heavily weighted to the commercial class. We were realigning some of those larger meter sizes. So again, your commercial customers really were impacted last year by this increase. Residential customers did have a small wastewater increase, but it was not as significant as the commercial side. When we're going through this rate study process, we always look back at a resolution that the City Council adopted in 2010. This was set by policy in 2010, and it's called the Rate Maintenance Policy. And this kind of sets the parameters for when we would come and recommend a rate increase and when we wouldn't. So there are several elements to this policy, but one thing we look at is what you have in the bank, what you have in reserves. You have some requirements for an interest and sinking fund. You have to have sufficient reserves in the bank to pay your debt. You also have to have a small contingency fund in place. Right now, you are fine on all that. The reserves are in good shape. But we also look at rate performance. We look at an item that we call debt service coverage. We have to make sure that your rate revenues that are anticipated to be earned under your then current rates would be sufficient to pay your debt with a slight cushion. It's about a 10% cushion under that policy. That's where we're not quite where we need to be this year. We are recommending a bit of an increase to get back to that rate maintenance policy. So as you see on the screen right now, slide 5 here, the findings, again, the retail revenue requirement, that's what we need to generate through rates. On the water side, our cost actually went up year over year by about 8.6%. Wastewater went down slightly. It went down about 1.6%. Again, as I said, the money that you have in the bank in your reserve funds right now is sufficient to meet your rate maintenance policy. But as we look at slide 6, we are insufficient in our rates to meet the debt service coverage requirement. Why is that? What have we seen? We are seeing usage come down. So in this past year, we saw residential consumption go down. We saw sewer flow go down. That is not unusual. That is going on throughout the industry. Unfortunately, water is subject to weather, and so that can also be a weather-driven item. We try to normalize as best we can in our revenue projection, but again, we're not quite where we need to be in terms of water and wastewater revenue performance. At the same time, I want to bring your attention to that bottom bullet on the screen. In conversations with your city manager, your finance director, we've talked about the wastewater treatment plant and all of the elements that you're talking about with that program. I've spoken with your engineer. I'm starting to look at those cost estimates. And so that tends to kind of cloud our view as we move forward. We want to make sure that we are moving forward in a path that we can support whatever you ultimately decide to do with that wastewater treatment plant. As you issue debt for the wastewater treatment plant, I want to make sure you hear this. As you issue debt for that wastewater treatment plant, the rate maintenance policy is going to come into effect. It's going to raise your required reserves. It's going to raise your required revenues to meet that debt service coverage requirement. So just keep that in mind as you're looking forward to that significant project. So we are recommending 2 different scenarios this year. Scenario 1 is what comes out of the study. We call that the full cost of service scenario. If we were going to generate every dime we need under our projections, you would go with scenario 1. However, we want to make sure that we are being good stewards of the money that is allocated to us. We want to make sure that we're being sensitive to the affordability of our utility. With that, we're also bringing scenario 2. This is a different recommendation this year. It actually is a little bit below cost of service. What scenario 2 would require you to do is pull a little bit out of reserves if you need it to fund capital. There's about a $300,000 difference between scenario 1 and scenario 2. So again, scenario 2 is just slightly lower, trying to reflect that we want to keep rates at the most reasonable level possible. On slide 8, you can see, again, this is where we do our debt service coverage check, just providing you some of these numbers. The only thing that varies within these columns is that total revenue line. You can see that under scenario 1, we're actually at about 1.18. We're above that policy, but we're recovering some cash capital that we need. Under scenario 2, we hit that policy straight on. We're at the 1.1, but we may need to pull some money out of reserves for some cash capital outlays. That's the only difference that you see between scenario 1 and scenario 2. And again, scenario 2, in terms of a customer impact, scenario 2 is lower. So on slide 9, this is the anticipated customer impact combined monthly customer impact, putting water and wastewater together. We have 3 levels listed on the screen here: 2,000 gallons, 5,000 gallons, 10,000 gallons. Right now, an average residential customer here in the city is right at about 4,000 gallons. So you're kind of between that 2 and 5 level. We use these benchmarks because they're industry standard, but you're right below, as an average customer, you're at that 4,000 gallon level. So again, a 2,000 gallon customer under scenario 1, total monthly bill change $3.27. Under scenario 2, total monthly bill change is less, $2.42. And again, most of your customers on average are going to be slightly below that 5,000. And when I ran the math on that, it was about $6.18 a month under scenario 1 would be the monthly change. Scenario 2 was about $4.58. So slightly over $4.50 a month for the average customer under scenario 2. The next slides, I'm not going to belabor here. This just presents the rates under scenario 1 and scenario 2. Slide 10 is the proposed residential rates for your consideration. Slide 11 is the proposed commercial rates under the different scenarios. And then slide 12, same kind of setup, that's proposed residential wastewater rates. And then slide 13 is the proposed commercial wastewater rates. And again, it's my understanding you will get this presentation, so you'll have all of that as you look towards ordinance consideration at a later date. But again, the big thing I want to bring your attention to is that customer impact. Slide 14 we talk about every year, and I'm fairly certain I say the same thing every year. While councils like to see where they are in comparison to other cities and many times their neighbors, you have to do what's right for your utility. Remember that you sit as the board of directors of a business. A water and sewer utility is a business-type activity of government. For a business to be successful, revenues must match or exceed expenses. So while one city may be charging less, they may have another source of revenue. They may be using property taxes to support their utility. They may have some other different treatment process or different source of water. So again, this is not an apples-to-apples comparison. Every city is different, and you need to take that into account as you look at this information. But again, as we do look at the information, the blue section is water, the green bar section is wastewater. As far as water goes, if you were to just line up water, you would be towards the mid to bottom half of the comparison. On the wastewater, you're on the upper end. But again, in terms right now for a 5,000 gallon customer, a monthly bill is about $72.68. Under scenario 1, that would go up to $80.33. Again, scenario 2, which is lower, would take that average monthly bill under 5,000 gallons up to $78.34. So again, I know it's like drinking from a fire hose, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Could we as a city, and this is, and Grayson, I don't mean to put another thing on your back here, but could we look at maybe some budget, and Gene, maybe some budget things that we could to offset some of these costs? Now, granted, I think in Mount Pleasant, you go further south, they have pretty nice things sitting underneath them called well water. And they can get water a whole lot easier than we can. That water is actually, they pull it straight out of the ground and you can go to drinking it. We're having to obviously do filter work and other things that some other areas don't have to do. Groundwater is not a item that we get to run off with. But I wonder if there's something that we could do budget-wise that we could not necessarily constrain another department, but some way divert and maybe get some relief for especially our commercial guys. That's the thing that kind of worries me a little bit with some of our larger water users.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'll be able to get that done for the next council meeting.
Right.
I've still not even looked at the budget yet for my process here, so I couldn't even begin to really adequately tell you what is or is not something we could try to cut or something. I'm not sure if I'll even be able to get that done this summer yet, as I'm trying to learn. So I apologize for that.
And like I say, that's a huge feat. I'm just trying to think outside the box a little bit, how we could be a little more competitive.
But that is the key, though, is looking at your expenditures and seeing what does it cost for services and seeing what a treatment. Because I've come from a well water community and a prior community.
Is this number 2, and you're looking at debt service? Are you looking at debt service that we have currently, or debt service that we may incur with this new wastewater?
This is all current.
Okay.
This is all current debt that you currently have on the books.
What would your recommendation be between these two scenarios, given that we're anticipating substantial expenses at the wastewater treatment plant?
I'm very, very much torn. Had we not come through what we've recently come through with COVID, I would be standing here saying full cost of service, absolutely, we have to do it. But we are also very sensitive to the fact of what
People have lost
residents
a
and
lot of-
commercial customers are going through.
They've lost a lot of income.
Everyone has been impacted by it. And so from that standpoint, from an affordability standpoint, I think scenario 2 may be your best approach at this time. However, I would take very careful note as you look at your wastewater treatment plant and this project going forward. Again, I'm working with your engineer on some cost estimates and impact. We have to understand what that's going to mean in terms of making sure we're compliant with that policy. The reason I harp on that policy is because when you go to issue the debt for the wastewater treatment plant, the first thing that the rating agencies are going to do is look at your policies and have you complied with your policies. If they come back and see that you haven't complied, that could be a mark against you. So we want to make sure that we're balancing this, both balancing affordability to customers with making sure that we are taking care of our business in such a way that we can get the lowest borrowing cost possible. Because over the long term, that's going to benefit everyone. So again, I think you're safe to go with scenario 2 this year.
You don't think that would hurt our bond rating?
I personally don't think so. We might want to pray for a long, hot, dry summer. That would help revenues as well.
Okay. All right, any other questions? It's just informational today, but anybody have any questions?
I think he's telling me I planted too many pots of flowers.
Well, I'd just like to say that you've explained this very well.
Yes.
Thank you.
And your presentation was good. I mean, it may not be what we want to hear, but it's certainly, you presented it very well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right,
Best in the business.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Item number 16, this will be easy. Discuss and act on an ordinance granting a taxi cab license to Michael Glenn Turner, doing business as Texas Transportation, to operate a taxi cab business on the public streets of the city of Paris.
Okay, this is Mr. Turner's first year to apply for an application. He's wants to operate taxi cabs throughout Paris and other cities. He has provided us with the insurance. He's made the application. Everything's in order, and I'm asking you all to approve it.
Okay. Any discussion? And it does require 5 votes to approve this?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions, any discussion? No? I'll entertain a motion here.
I make a motion to approve as written.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Item number 17, discuss and act on an ordinance amending Article 11 of Chapter 2, Section 2-551 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Paris, Texas, to remove the requirement that the mayor nominate members for the Municipal Band Commission. I just think we ought to get, as the law permits now, the housing authority, that's state mandated. But I was reading the municipal band bylaws, and I was shocked to find out I was the only one that was allowed to nominate people to, which we've never done anyway. But I'd just like to get our bylaws to the point where we're actually following our bylaws. And if we have to change our bylaws to get them all uniform, this was the first step in doing that. Are there any other bylaws that are going to need to be changed, or were the rest of them in pretty good shape? Ms. Harris?
We're still working through that. In this instance, the municipal band is governed by an ordinance. So this is why we brought you an ordinance to change that,
Okay.
to just remove that requirement that the mayor be the only one who can nominate members.
I just wanted to make this uniform across the boards as is possible. The mayor can, according to state law, we have to have a special exemption for the housing authority for some reason. But
okay, that's what I was going to ask.
it's mandatory. It's,
Okay.
as I understand, is that correct? It's state mandated. We don't have any option in that.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Yes, that's a statutory requirement that the mayor appoint. It's not even nominate, the mayor appoints people to the housing
Okay.
authority board.
But I just wanted to put this on at least to take a step in the right direction of getting things more uniform, shall we say. particularly since none of us even knew about this.
And so as city staff, we're going to be working to look at all of our bylaws of all of our committees and boards and seeing what are the rules, how do we amend those rules, because each one has their own amendment language, and then, so we'll be working on it over the next several months in preparation for next year, so.
Because I just like to get it all uniform. That was the whole point of this. And I knew about this personally because I'd read it, and that's why I put it on the agenda. So, any discussion about taking power away from me? Go ahead.
I have no problem with that.
There you go. Okay. I'll make the motion that we make this amendment.
I second.
All in favor? Great, thank you. And the next one is mine too. Let me pull up the text of this. 18, discuss and act on procedures for the appointment of the board and commission members. And let me pull up my, okay. It's come to my attention and as I voted on committees, many times, you'll have your first choice, second choice, third choice, and fourth choice, and on down the list. And then because of whoever gets nominated first, whoever comes up for a vote, your fourth choice comes up for a vote. Now, what do? Do you vote for your fourth choice? Or do you hold off and your fourth choice doesn't get on and maybe your first choice doesn't even come up for a vote? So it seemed to me a more logical way to do this would be for us all to rank everyone, and then your second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever choice gets a point value, and in one ballot you are basically telling the council who you would like to see. So let me read the things that I was proposing, and I got this in your packet. So, and I'm open for discussion. This is not written in stone. Number one, I wanted the first committee to be voted upon to be the PEDC. It typically is the most competitive one that we have. We get the most applications. And typically the second most popular one is planning and zoning. So I thought maybe the second committee that we would vote on would be planning and zoning. And then the order of the rest of the committees, I thought, which should be determined by the number of people applying. The committee with the most applicants, i.e. the most competitive one, would then be voted on next. And we're going down the line till we got the easier ones. Rule number 4, any of these rules can be suspended or changed as needed by a simple majority vote of the council on the fly if we find we need to do it because things aren't quite working out. Number 5, if any committee has applicants equal to or less than the number of vacancies on that committee, then the council may simply fill the available positions with a single majority vote. In other words, if you have 3 vacancies and only 2 people are applying or only 3 people are applying, unless we could make a motion to do that, if there's someone that you truly do not want on that committee, then you vote against that and then we'll discuss it at that point. So it's not mandatory we have to put people on, but in all honesty, for the most part, we will. Item number 6, each vote for committee membership will be preceded by a council discussion about any or all of the applicants. So if there's a discussion, if we want to say good things about somebody or heaven forbid bad things about somebody, we have the opportunity to do that before we rank anybody. And also, any applicant will be permitted to address the council. I think it's kind of important. People who really want to be on a committee probably should show up and tell us why they want to be on the committee, look us in the eyes and explain not more than just the application. They've already had that, the ability to do that, but I think encouraging them to do that would be good. Number 8, after all discussion, each council member would then rank the applicants in order from 1 to the number of applicants for the board being voted upon. So we got 7 applicants, we go from 1 to 7. So rank them all, give them 1, 2, 3, 4. So we each get a ballot from 1 through 7, we fill it out. And I think it's important that each applicant sign his or her ballot. These will be public documents that would be subject to a Freedom of Information request. So it would be important to know who voted for whom. Another reason I wanted to do this, sometimes it discourages people. Nobody wants to be the last choice of the council, okay? Nobody wants to throw his hat in the ring and he doesn't even get nominated. And in a way, this makes it a little more open and it makes it, remove some of the stigma, let's say. I mean, somebody's got to be first and somebody's got to be last, and that's just the way things work. But we don't have to broadcast and advertise that fact. Now, if the media want to get these and write a story on it, which I trust they probably wouldn't, as to who was last, they could because it is open information. But I think this would be a good way to encourage people to throw their hat in the ring, knowing that,
This would be like, let's say if you had the 7, so you go down the 7 list, your number, you would give more points to the
yeah,
person
yeah, and
that
I'm
you
coming to the points
wanted.
in a minute, coming to
Okay,
the points
sorry.
in a minute. I thought this through a lot. I couldn't sleep one night. So, okay, item number 10, each ballot will include a ranking of each candidate from number 1 down to the total number of people applying for the board. And after the ballots have been submitted, each candidate will be given a numerical ranking on each ballot based upon adding the point total from all ballots. I skipped one. I didn't. It's later. So each ballot will include a ranking of each candidate from number 1 down to the total number of people applying for the board. After the ballots have been submitted, each candidate will be given a numerical ranking on each ballot based upon adding the point total from all ballots. The number 1 person on any ballot will be assigned a number of points equal to the number of applicants for the position. So if you got 7 people, your number 1 choice gets 7 points, okay? And then the number 2 person on each ballot will be given a number of points equal to the number of applicants minus 1. So your number 1 gets 7, your number 2 gets 6, your number 3 gets all the way on down to your last choice gets 1 point. You always get a point, okay? So this will continue until the last choice on each ballot will be given 1 point. The points will be total, and the people with the top points will automatically be placed on the appropriate board. If you got 3 slots, the top 3 are automatically placed, and you don't tell them who was 1 or 2 or 3. You're on, okay? Now, ties. I was thinking about what we would do with ties. If there is a tie, let's say you got 3 slots and there's a tie between 3rd and 4th place, okay? So your first 2 are automatically on. So if there's a tie, then the 2 people who tied, let's bring it back to the council for an open public vote. Majority wins. We're voting who wants Ms. A or who wants Mr. B. And we raise our hands. If we still have a tie, then one way to do it is the person who got the highest number of points. In other words, somebody gave him a 1 and everybody else gave him a 3, and then the other guy, everybody gave him a 2 across the board. Well, the guy that got the 1 would get it. We could do that, or we could flip a coin, or we could postpone it to another meeting. That would be our discretion to do that. I don't think the ties are going to come up very often, but if they do, I think we, as a council, would have to decide how we wanted to break the tie. Those are the way I proposed it, though. So if the vote ends in a tie, the person who had the highest votes by individual council members on the original ballot would be determined the winner rather than flipping a coin. So in the event someone has applied for multiple board positions, without describing the procedure, every effort will be made to place the applicant in his or her most preferred board position at the discretion of the council. So that there may be a case. That's why I want the most competitive boards up first, and then hopefully that won't happen very often. But if it does, we'll play it by ear at the time it happens. Number 19, I threw out there, if you, let's just say, for instance, the municipal band, and I know the municipal band, and I know the people, and I'll make my case for them. But let's say you don't really have a preference. You could sign a blank ballot, and that will assign no points to any applicant. Basically, you're deferring to the rest of the council. Now, we can do that, we cannot do that. But I thought if there's really somebody that you really don't know, I mean, it looks good on paper, but you'll defer to someone else. We could either do that, or we could just make our case for maybe it's better to just make our case for the people that we want to make our case for and try to, so maybe I'm iffy on 19. I'm thinking about deleting 19. And finally, if there's any problems or inconsistencies that arise from the above rules, the council can amend these rules by a simple majority vote. So that's what I came up with. You're free to criticize or give me additions or, things that you like or don't like. I'll open it up for discussion.
I have a question. Now, so all of our voting is going to be by ballot?
Yeah.
There won't be any public,
No, unless there's a tie. We'll make our case for the people we want to vote for if we want to, and we can have the discussion all we want to, but then you'll write the names down in order, and sign your name to the ballot. And then we'll take a brief recess while the ballots are counted, and then they'll come back and they'll announce the people who are on the boards, pending shifts, assuming someone's first place, he gets on, and then we have to pull people off and put people back on.
I think if you go in the order like you were talking though, the EDC, we've always got a bunch of people that apply for that board. But let's say if I'm just making a name up, Joe Smith applies for 3 boards, he doesn't get on the EDC, obviously, or if he does get on the EDC and then you go down to planning and zoning, you would just cross him out of the ballot completely.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what you do.
Right, okay.
If he got on his first place board of choice, he would be removed from all the other ones, and he wouldn't even be in contention anymore for those.
And that may be something we need to notice to the applicants too, you know, if.
The applicants need to tell us the order they want to go. Janice, if they haven't given us that information, they need to. If they apply for 2 or more boards, they need to write a 1, this is my first choice, 2, this is my second choice, 3, this is my third choice, and we'll do our best to accommodate them.
Yeah,
It is, I thought it was, okay.
Cool.
Yes, sir.
I was thinking about, as far as you, the boards, as far as the order, will we have to go in order of need or assignment? Like some board missing 3 people, so we most definitely want to try to get that one filled. But I guess it would be tough to do the order because you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
'Cause like I said, if band needed 3 people, that.
Yeah. I still think the best way would be to do the most competitive board or the most
PDC
applicants.
first and
And
don't
don't fill those up first, because
Yes.
we're going to fill those anyway.
Yes.
And then the people that don't get in that board, they're now, if they've applied for other boards, they're now available for those other boards. But you know how we often end up with a couple of slots that we
Yeah,
can't
can't
fill,
fill
and then we
anyway.
have to re-advertise. So that's not going to go away by doing this.
Now, I like the idea of not publicly nominating someone because it just,
Yeah.
not that everybody, you're not good, but you can't nominate everybody.
That's right.
So I like that idea just for the applicants.
Yeah,
So-
and then everybody's got a fair shot, and then you get to say who let's say there's 2 slots, but you get to say who your third choice is, because the points you will give more points to your third choice than you will your 5th, and so you'll at least have a say so. Even if your number 1 and number 2 person don't get on the board, you at least have given higher points to your number 3 and your number 4 choice, which we were never able to do before. And I just think this will solve a lot of the problems. Again, this was just a brainstorm I did, but any
One more clarity question. As far as, like I say, the applicants and the names, they would be able to come, introduce themselves.
certainly can.
And everything, would that be in the meeting before we do the voting, or?
The meeting we do the
of?
vote, yeah. I think that would be most appropriate, so it'd be fresh on our minds.
Yes, and then are we going in the executive session to do the tally up? Or
What
are
we would
doing-
probably do, it would just take a second to tally them anyway. Janice or somebody could write the numbers on it. They could walk back there while we take a sip of water, and they could come back. And if it's straightforward and the numbers, there's a clear-cut winner, just come back in and announce the winners. If there's any question or any problem or any irregularity, we could discuss it publicly as part of the meeting.
I'm assuming you checked out to see if this is legal. I mean, that's
Well, the council, correct me if I'm wrong, the council is allowed to set up any policy or procedure they want to, right?
Well, within reason. I mean,
Well-
you can't do deliberations. I'm a little uncomfortable without doing some more research that you could go and do any of this in executive session. I mean, I foresee.
We're not talking
No,
executive.
no,
We're not
that's
going
what
to
I was
executive
asking.
session.
I mean, I foresee that you're all sitting that far apart, because this is in 2 weeks, and you're filling out your things, and then
And you
you're
give it-
giving them to
give it to
a
Janice.
staff member to tabulate, and you go
Yeah,
from
and they
there.
tabulate them up, and then they announce the winners.
And
if
I
there's
think
an
under those
irregularity or
circumstances, it would probably be okay.
Okay.
You want as much of it to be, you're striving for transparency.
Sure, and that's why I would say everyone needs to sign the ballot. The ballots are public information if somebody wants to look at them. I'm just trying to avoid some of the humiliation that comes from being dead last, or that comes from not even getting nominated. When you really were interested in the city and you wanted to give your time, and your name didn't even get nominated, and it happens all the time.
Sure, and that is certainly a good and humane impulse. It's just, if it runs up against The Open Meetings Act, you got to defer to the Open Meetings Act.
Well, and that's, okay, well, you tell me. I mean, you're the expert in that, so I don't want to go, obviously, we don't want to violate open meetings, but do you see anything in this that immediately would suggest that would be a violation of open meetings?
I think you can do it just as long as you're all up here, it's all in
Yeah.
front of everybody that this is occurring.
I'm fine with it.
I
I
think
mean,
that that's okay.
It's like you say, you know, if I nominate Joe Smith and you've got Don Smith or whoever, and that was your, you know, first choice, and this was my first choice, and then Paula or Renee or Derek or, I mean, somebody else may have a first choice that we don't hear because we may just vote those two on right off the bat.
Yeah, and they never even come up.
Yeah.
And my first, yeah, your first choice never even came up. So at least you get the, you get to numerically say, tell us who your first, second, third, fourth choice people are, and mathematically it will be considered. You may not win, but it will be considered.
Well, I think it's certainly more adult than pulling it out of a bag.
Okay.
And you've done a lot of work on it, so thank you for that.
Okay, well, if again, we could, if y'all want to adopt this, we could just tentatively agree to do this. I don't think we have to vote on it. If it gets to the date and it's not working, or y'all decide, you know, I don't like this, we could just say, okay, let's go back to the other way. We could, or we could do this on the first two, and then we could go back to the other way.
I'm in favor.
Okay, well, it wasn't an action item necessarily, well, it was an action item. So y'all wanna make a
I
motion
make a
to
motion,
adopt
we
this?
adopt the procedures to appoint of the board and commission members so as written.
All right, pending
Second.
approval of the city
Yeah, depending
attorney.
on Stephanie changing it.
Some of it, we may be feeling this out as we go too,
Yes.
because this will be the first time we've done
I
it.
second.
Okay, all in favor? All right, great. Thank y'all, appreciate it. And item number 20, any future events we wish to discuss? Well, if not, motion for adjournment. All in
Second.
favor? Thank y'all for coming and for wearing the masks.
I know
and
it. Feels so good to be
It's
back.
so much better having these meetings in person.
Definitely. We did.